Thank you, comrades. Mandla. Thank you. I know the chair is worried about time, so I'm stopping, Comrade General Secretary. But I must thank Comrade Irvin Jim and the leadership of NUMSA for inviting me to be here today. When I got the message from Comrade Irvin Jim that NUMSA would consider me speaking at a conference of NUMSA, I must say initially I was very shocked because I'm quite a conservative type of person. But I really thank NUMSA for the invitation and the opportunity to speak about some of the work that we do. I begin by thanking the comrades from Palestine who have spoken, and I greet them most warmly. Welcome to South Africa. I also greet Comrade Ronnie Casserols, a veteran who doesn't tire. I don't know where you get this energy. He sends me messages at 3 a.m. You must issue a statement on this. Why are you saying nothing on that? Comrade Ronnie, there you are. He takes advantage because he knew my father. He thinks that he's my father. But I'm very glad to be here. I begin by saying the world is a very troubled place, and I don't want us to pretend that it is easy. It's not. We are faced with a very challenged world. I realized this when in 2021 I was sitting in a summit of the Executive Council of the African Union, and it was whispered to me that the African Union Commission chairperson had issued an invitation to Israel to become an observer at the African Union. Imagine my horror. I decided at that moment that I would raise my arm and would propose that this decision be rescinded. I walked around the room seeking supporters. Of the 54 nations, I got 3. And I include SADC in that. But I said, nevertheless, this is not going to happen. I therefore lifted my arm and said, I wish to table a matter. I have learned of this, and as South Africa, we object to it, and it must not be implemented. We want our leaders to discuss it. And we will never accept it as South Africa, and while we appreciate the role that the Organization of African Unity played in us achieving our freedom as South Africa, this decision of the AU Commission chairperson will make us consider whether we can be present in the African Union. I thought I would get support from many of the countries gathered in the room. But what I discovered is that countries that are oppressors, that continue to be colonial occupiers, are using financial muscle to provide grant in aid to African countries and secure the depoliticized support of African countries for these oppressive nations. Among them, Israel and Morocco. They're playing a very negative role in Africa. And comrades, I'm being frank here because you, in this room, you are supposed to be trade union leaders, many of you, or you lead progressive organizations, and you are failing in your duty to convince governments in Africa and all other countries of the South that they cannot tolerate such situations. It can't be left to us as members of government to be the ones that take up these issues with no word from progressive organizations. This is intolerable and cannot continue. So I'm hoping out of this conference that you are going to decide, rise up, rise up, rise up. Don't say, what's Comrade Naledi doing? That decision on Israel hasn't been implemented, and it won't be while I'm still there. But what are you going to do? You should be talking to all progressive unions worldwide. The unions in the United States of America, weak or strong, should be making it clear to President Biden they don't appreciate his statement, which has led to the slaughter we are seeing today. The union movement in the United Kingdom should be doing the same. If we know our work, I have no idea what has happened to our organizational capability. Because as South African leadership, our trade union movement was able to marshal under the worst oppressive chains. We were able to marshal international solidarity of a kind that has not been seen since the struggle against apartheid. Where have all these progressive leaders gone and why? Why are we not able to organize? Why are we only sitting in a room as 300? There should be 3,000 here. There's something wrong, and that's why I'm saying we're in a troubled world. And we need to recognize that the world has shifted. Because what has happened is, in a determined fashion, progressive values and principles have been hacked and hacked and hacked, and it is now difficult to find a voice of the left. And we need to revive. We need to organize. We need to be smart. We need to be strategic. And one thing I've realized is making good speeches does not assist. I may feel good that I had the right rhetoric at that platform, but if the next day my rhetoric has not led to action, my speech was useless. So I hope out of this, NUMSA is going to lead a process where Comrade Irvin Jim and Comrade Chirwa will meet with their counterparts in all unions, whatever they are, and say, as South African trade union movement, let us lead. Let us lead. Let us agree for 1 month. None of our unions are going to lift any Israeli goods out of any transport. Just one thing. And let us see whether our leadership has convening power or not. This week, coming, a number of proposed resolutions are going to come before the United Nations. We must keep our eye on that process. We must ensure it's the right kind of resolutions. Today, the people of Palestine are in need of help. They need medical supplies. They are unable to bandage wounds. They cannot provide help. Médecins Sans Frontières is doing a good job. They are absolutely there, but they are also being decimated. What are we going to do about that? Let's ask every South African. There are 62 million of us, they say. All of us must donate one thing, food or medical goods. And let us persuade an airline to take them all to the Egyptian border with Palestine and deliver those goods. Let's do something, comrades. Let's stop talking, because the world is in a terrible place, and all it needs are a few good men and women, are organizers, strategists. And not to organize because you're NUMSA only, but to organize everybody. What we have to put aside if you want to change the world are divisions between us. Because it doesn't make any sense to believe that I must be the most progressive, the most left, the most radical, and the world is suffering. The most progressive thing is to unite and get action. And that's what I hope you're going to begin to do. So anyway, on my story, on the presence of Israel as an observer in the African Union, I have managed to pause it for now with the support of my president, but it's not off the table in the AU. So again, I'm asking you, pay attention. Having said that, because I prepared very hard, I'm going to present my speech. And I begin by saying, one of the things we must realize is the developing South is caught in the middle of rising global tensions. I know it is not correct to speak of the South as though it's a homogeneous entity. But from my experience, I can say to you, it is the region that most hopefully has the basis and foundation for the kind of radical shift we need. So I look to countries of the South, not the North. And I think it's important that we do that. What we are seeing in the world is an increasing pushback against the forces that seek to promote collective action, international solidarity, and global cooperation. We see the re-emergence of tendencies toward right-wing nationalism, unilateralism, and populism as an ongoing trend. Comrades, another assignment, engage the media. Why is it all right for a Palestinian journalist to be murdered, but it's not okay for a journalist from Canada to be murdered? What kind of value system is that? We've been silent about Shireen Abu Akleh. She was murdered before our eyes. The media today, since the period of the embeddedness of Iraq, totally without objectivity, except Al Jazeera. That's the only one. The rest, I'm sorry. But you need to be active proponents of an objective media that informs, that is balanced, and that tells the truth. Not a media that lies and tells you a quarter of the story. So we've got to address all these things. What we see in the globe today is widening inequality. And we know that the economy of the globe continues to deliver inequitable and unjust outcomes. Developed countries have selectively opted out of the observance of international law, while they continue to insist that rules must be implemented by developing countries, even at the cost of providing services to their people. Just last year, Ghana was facing an incredible financial meltdown. They approached the IMF. And this year, the IMF has suddenly reported that Ghana is going to see amazing growth after they received loans from the IMF. But nobody is examining, do the children of Ghana have classrooms? Do they have teachers in those classrooms? Are they able to go to hospital and get treatment? Are the people of Ghana getting housing? Because the first target of IMF loans is public services. So it's important that we look not just at what support is provided, but at the quid pro quos that governments have to make in order to have access to that funding. Developed countries have certainly not met their commitments to the developing world and are consistently shifting responsibility to us in the global South. You must address climate change. You must stop using coal. You must reduce emissions. You must do A, B, and C. We've developed, they had thousands of years to develop, and in a short space of time, we must arrest our development and respond to their demands. I'm not saying coal is what we should use. I'm not saying we shouldn't reduce emission. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm saying the kinds of demands being made on developing countries without appropriate resource responses are actually demands that are unconscionable. So what this has led to is it's become increasingly difficult to pursue sustainable development goals. We saw this year that the Secretary General of the United Nations has indicated that far from moving in a positive fashion, the world is actually going backwards. We now have more poverty, more inequity, more joblessness. So the fundamental crises of our time call for international responses, in our view. If we accept that the world is increasingly more fragmented, it provides an opportunity for those concerned with economic justice, yourselves, to work toward creating a genuinely progressive alternative. Progressive forces around the world need to push for multipolarity and a strengthened, fairer, and more inclusive multilateralism by exerting more influence on global debates. We should not be silent. We should be having loud views. We need to make our economies work for the common good, and we need to take all the measures necessary to protect our planet. We believe that what is needed is a different kind of multilateral architecture, which is more suited to today's challenges of the world. In our own view, Comrade Ronnie, despite its inadequacies, it is our belief that the United Nations must remain the primary locus for political, security, and development decision-making, as it remains the most representative global body, despite its shortcomings. We believe a complete overhaul of the UN system is needed so that the UN Security Council is democratized and reflects the current balance of forces in the global system. It's unacceptable, 8 decades nearly after its creation, 5 nations still wield disproportionate decision-making power in the Security Council, and those 5 number among the most problematic countries in the world, the causes of many of the problems I referred to today. So the overhaul of the UN system should include enforcement of decisions taken by what we hope will be a democratized UN Security Council. We also believe we should no longer accept a situation where countless UN resolutions are passed by the vast majority in the UN General Assembly, but are merely ignored. We've had repeated calls, as Comrade Khalida said, from UN member states for Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories to the 1967 borders. These decisions have been ignored, and instead, we have witnessed the burgeoning expansion of illegal settlements on Palestinian land, growing oppression of the Palestinian people, gross violation of their human rights, and the Gaza Strip being turned into an open-air prison, regularly denied electricity, water, and fuel. The current denial is not new. It's been happening time and time and time again. For 16 years, Gaza has been under siege, with its people struggling to survive the ongoing land, air, and sea blockade imposed by Israel, with Palestinians denied exit and entry into the Strip. I was horrified when one of our former leaders, Comrade, I don't know if I should call him Comrade anymore, Comrade Teralekota, said that Israel is not an apartheid state. Well, the Palestinians are denied free exit and entry into their own land. They do not have free movement. We didn't have free movement under apartheid. Palestinian people use separate entrances when they go through the border. We had to use separate entrances under apartheid. Palestinian children do not have free access to education. It was the same for us. So I don't know what more Israel should do for Comrade Likota to recognize that it is an apartheid state. We've seen today increased Israeli aggression under the most far-right Israeli government we've ever seen. And we've seen the inaction by the Security Council, the very body whose mandate is to maintain international peace and security. Despite the fact that the root cause of this conflict is illegal occupation, we have heard a tirade of criticism of Palestinians from Western powers and unflinching support for the occupying power, despite the fact that I've been called all kinds of names because I refused to call Russia an occupying power of Ukraine. I have always objected to double standards. These type of double standards are the result of a global system which is skewed in favor of the powerful, to the detriment of those fighting for their rights and self-determination. I repeat, it is imperative that social movements raise their voices in solidarity with the Palestinian people, particularly given the notably biased media coverage of the current violence. Within the United Nations, we have seen almost unanimous support among member states for ending the illegal economic blockade of Cuba, which is now entering its 61st year. Yet, the Cuban people continue to be denied access to life-saving medicines, essential goods, and the right to trade as any other sovereign nation. These are injustices that once more need to be taken up by the Global South and progressive forces worldwide to create a groundswell of popular support for the Cuban people, as well as the people of Palestine and all oppressed people all over the world. In South Africa, as the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation, we wanted to provide support to the people of Cuba after they sent an appeal to us. When our opposition parties got hold of our intention, they, through an organization called AfriForum, took us to court. And the court ruled that I must use that money for poor people in South Africa and not provide anything to the people of Cuba. Of course, I'm appealing that decision, but here's my troubling point. The progressive forces of South Africa have never spoken up in support of my fight in court. And AfriForum is decimating all the progressive gains we have made in South Africa, including affirmative action, and we are allowing it to happen while we live. We are also articulating calls that we should overhaul the current global financial and trade architecture, and much of the world is joining us in this call. We believe we need a fundamental reset of the Bretton Woods institutions, including the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. Multilateral development finance institutions need to be redesigned to respond to the challenges we are confronted with and to assist countries to meet the sustainable development goals. They must help us respond effectively to public health emergencies and to mitigate climate change. The IMF needs to be repurposed and should provide counter-cyclical lending in times of debt distress, enable debt restructuring and relief, and provide liquidity to all countries that require it. I'm raising all these things, Comrade Chira, because I believe while we should have the debates you will have in this meeting, we also must look at the real situation of the globe and determine how we interface with these challenges and address them. We are fortunate as South Africa to be part of the BRICS partnership. And in BRICS, as the BRICS countries, we've been working toward developing a more equitable, balanced, and representative global governance system. This includes the restructuring of the global financial architecture. We have built up an institution such as the New Development Bank, which we own as BRICS, and it has given us, as emerging economies, greater control over lending and greater autonomy over the progress and course of our development. As we discussed in the most recent BRICS summit, which we hosted as South Africa, the concept of countries opting to conduct trade in their own currencies is to us a welcome development. And we are now investigating how we can multiply such practice and have it available to all of us. Emerging economies are key to reforming global governance. The fact that we've had emerging economies holding the G20 presidency for the last 4 years is an opportunity that we should not waste as countries of the South. Indonesia held the presidency last year and brought back development issues into G20. India held it this year and sustained that focus. Brazil is assuming the G20 chair next year, and we must ensure it holds the ground. And in 2025, South Africa will be chair of G20. And again, we must strengthen the progressive ground. With leading countries of the Global South able to set the world agenda, this is an opportunity for all of us to push for real change. Let's not waste it. The demands that were made over 50 years ago by the Global South when it met as NAM, that we should overhaul the rules of international trade, reform the international financial system, and recognize the sovereignty of each state over its natural resources. All of these, articulated over 50 years ago, are gaining momentum today. The Global South is calling for cancellation of historical debt. There must be content to our progressive agenda. Content. The issuance of new IMF special drawing rights is something South Africa has been insisting upon. The expansion of concessional development financing and technology transfer. All of these are based on the concept of the right to development, which many of us have forgotten. Ironically, all of these principles form part of a declaration that the UN adopted in 1974. But this was largely disregarded by multilateral bodies that instead imposed neoliberal policies on developing countries to ensure they implement extreme trade liberalization to their people's cost. Today, developing countries, which include the Africa Group, India, and Cuba, have tabled a proposal on the reform of the WTO, a proposal called Strengthening the WTO to Promote Development and Inclusivity. The proposal cites World Bank data to show that the gap in per capita GDP between the developed and developing world has widened since WTO was created, and calling for special and differential treatment to be upheld in future agreements. The proposal calls for respect for the right of countries to adopt different economic models and supports diversification and development. We also require multilateral security arrangements. We need to reject military alliances that divide the world into blocs, but do not offer answers to the challenges we confront. We are seeing now the weaponization of the ocean, Indo-Pacific Alliance, and so on. All of this is meant to take unipolar control of the oceans and deny us the right to peace and development which the oceans offer the world. What we need today, more than ever before, and that's why this conference is to me vitally important, we need international solidarity. There's an urgent need for this in responding to the crises confronting us. During our struggle in South Africa, The principle of international solidarity was one of the key pillars of our struggle. It was through this pillar that civil society, political parties, academia, and other sectors all over the world were mobilized to isolate the apartheid regime. This pillar of international solidarity made an immense contribution to our victory against apartheid, to the extent that some analysts have even tried to elevate it above other very important pillars, such as the underground, the armed struggle, which Comrade has referred to, and the mass struggle, which we must never forget. These four pillars of the struggle complemented and reinforced each other to deliver the death of the apartheid regime. So again, we need to revive international solidarity as a pillar. We need to revive underground as a pillar. We need to revive armed struggle as a pillar. And we need to ensure mass struggle as a pillar. The international struggle against apartheid embodied humanity's struggle against discrimination and social exclusion. Our post-apartheid South Africa has attempted to continue this tradition of active internationalism on the continent and globally. We've tried to play our part in the renewal of Africa, promoting South-South cooperation, engaging countries of the North in the interest of Africa, and striving for the transformation of the global system of governance. We know we benefited, and we are trying to use our benefit in the interest of others. We believe that today internationalism is going to be decisive in crystallizing new forms of organizing political forces for meaningful transformation. But as I said earlier, we need a strategic approach to the search for a better international order, one that is equitable, just, humane, inclusive, and democratic. So while I agree with BDS and the focus it has, I think we need to discuss how do we activate this in a manner that allows us to achieve the outcomes we desire, and not as an illustration of our ability to organize. And I haven't yet had that strategic advice. So with the BDS intervention at the ANC conference in 2017, we did indeed remove an ambassador from Israel. But I haven't seen it advance the peace agenda. So how do we act together to make gains in the struggle, rather than to have illustrations of action? This is the kind of strategic discussion I hope we could have at some time. I believe we need to continue as South Africa to contribute to the building of a global progressive movement for a better Africa and a better world. People need to be shaken out of complacency and distraction. Progressive forces of the left need to step in, need to provide hope and vision, and offer up concrete pathways to political action. Across the global South, the progressive community has begun to rally. We look forward to the expansion of brave, united, vibrant social movements. As the great revolutionary leader of Cuba, President Fidel Castro, said, we need to unite today to build the tomorrow we yearn for, to vindicate the always excluded, and to rescue faith in humanity. I hope we can do this, and I thank you for listening to me. these questions, that we shouldn't pretend that the people of Palestine are not suffering under the yoke of oppression and occupation. We know this for a fact. The world knows it. But some choose to pretend that this is not the case. It would be intolerable from our perspective that an occupying country be given a presence in the African Union, which implies that that country is acting in terms of all the values and principles elaborated in the Charter of the AU. It's always vital when we discuss this matter to say one of the aspects of the AU Charter is a rejection of imperialism, occupation of any kind, infringement of sovereignty and territorial integrity. These are principles we refer to when we speak of Ukraine, but we don't refer to them when we speak of the people of Palestine. And we're saying, as the African Union, we have a duty to uphold our own charter, nothing else, not a new demand, not a new principle, but actually what exists on paper and has been signed on to by all of us.
You have also challenged the delegates, particularly the Labour in South Africa, that they must act, for example, at times refuse to offload the cargo from Israel.
I raise this matter because, whenever I'm in an audience such as this one, I'm asked by delegates, what's the government doing? Why is government not doing this? Why is government not doing that? And so I was asking them, what are you, as the trade union movement and organs of civil society, doing? You are far more powerful than an individual South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. Use your organizational muscle to unite and do more. They've been able here, NUMSA, to bring over 50 organizations from all over the world, Puerto Rico, United States, all over. Why are they unable to organize a global protest against what's happening to the people of Palestine? So I'm saying, let us move from rhetoric to action, but not just us in government. I'm saying us as organized progressive forces of the South.
And finally, Minister, you've been there, you've been the face of South Africa, you have been communicating the foreign policy of South Africa. It has been 2 difficult years, the war in Ukraine, and now the Middle East question. You warned the world last year that you are focusing on Ukraine. You have forgotten the Middle East question. As a human being, it does take toll.
Well, certainly it does, but I think we have to continue. That's the one thing that South Africans have learned from their struggle, that you don't give up. You continue to struggle, and that's what in Southern Africa is our common slogan, a luta continua. So it's important as minister, but also as our government, as the governing party, the African National Congress, our leadership, President Ramaphosa, we must not forget to constantly refer to the terrible condition of the people of Palestine. It is actually just a bad stain on humanity that such a situation is allowed to go. As we watch buildings being bombed to the ground, people being killed, children dying, people not able to receive care in hospital, that countries can cut off fuel, electricity, food distribution from a people, a whole people, many of whom are not involved in what the issue is said to be about. The true issue is not the action of Hamas. The true issue is the question of the freedom and justice for people of Palestine. And this matter must be addressed if ever we are to have peace in the Middle East.
And life for Zionism. This is the roots of terrorism in the world. To occupy, to steal a land a homeland for a people who were and still called Palestinians. Still, the Zionists are practicing their policies. And they called for the whole world. A people without a land, to a land without people, to be the homeland. The world at that time, after the Second World War, practiced that. They believed the big lie in history, that they deserved a land which was promised by God. I knew that they don't know God, and God is not having real estate to give those people and that people. But they practiced it. And the whole world at that time believed that those poor Jews in Europe deserve this land. They even didn't know, or they didn't want to know, or they didn't believe that they could give a land to be a homeland for other people. This is in whole history. We didn't hear about such a lie. Until now, part of the world, the imperialists, the colonialists, the capitalists, they are still practicing this lie on our land in Palestine. And here, I tell you, from that moment, that our people did not accept this. They were faced by the Zionist militia groups, Haganah, Stern, and all these groups who fought with the help of the British, who were having, according to the Second World War, the mandate over Palestine. But they came to promote the Zionist vision towards this land, and they made it in 1948. I'm not going to have a lecture about history, but I'm going to focus on the roots of this catastrophe that happened to the Palestinian people. We never stopped struggling, and all the time we were besieged as a people, in camps, in exile. And those camps are the target of the Zionists, to delete them like we delete something on a computer. All the massacres that the Zionists did in Palestine and outside Palestine, they began with Deir Yassin and many other massacres, because this is the ideology of Zionism. It's an unhuman and a racist movement. It was condemned in the United Nations, but afterwards, with the change of the balance of forces in the world, they deleted it. And that was the only resolution that was deleted. Although there are a lot of resolutions in the United Nations until now, from the resolution 194 that calls Israel to accept the return of Palestinians is as a condition to be Israel a state in the United Nations. Look how cruel. What did the United Nations to us at that time? Israel was recognized as state, and the Palestinians are still refugees. I'm one of them. Here in South Africa, the sufferings of the people, whom we are with them as free people. But it took time, and it took so many sacrifices from the people themselves. We are not less than that. We are a people of strength, of will, of dignity, of humanity. We are defending humanity in Palestine. And this makes me call the conference to focus on this, because if Palestine until now is occupied, there is no peace in the world. Only if we become free. And we all together can be free. Palestine is not only for the Palestinians, it's a human cause. The conference is speaking about the problems of humanity. This is what we call that it's the reflection of what you think now about it. If you speak about poverty, Palestine is an example. If you speak about wars, Palestine is the example. If you speak about imperialism, we are the people who are now facing imperialism. We are the people who will make peace for the whole world if we become free. Without that, don't ever think that the water will be free for you, for the whole world. Because the Zionists now cut the water for 2 million and more in Gaza. Gaza now is the base for humanity, although we are still defending our humanity. With our children killed, our women are killed there, with bombarding their houses over their places where they live. And they want, as Netanyahu said, for Biden, we are obliged to go with the army to go in Gaza. But I remind you for what Rabin said one day, I hope I can get up in the morning to find Gaza swallowed by the sea. Imagine how the world looked at these people. Now, Netanyahu also said that we are going in, but we know that we are going to sacrifice with some soldiers. He did not learn the lesson. The only way for the imperialists, the Zionists, the colonialists, the oppressors of the people, whoever they are, the only way is to use force against them, to use armed struggle against them. With this, and to hit them on the heads, always. In America, in Europe, in everywhere. I call all the people of the world, where there is injustice, you have to struggle. You struggle with all means. We believe in that. But for occupants, they don't need except our guns and our blood. We are proud that Palestine Now Gaza is without water. Our children, our women, they are watering it with their blood. This is very hideous to us. This is very sad for a people who is an open prison in Gaza and in the West Bank and in exile. Now, until we are still in exile and we cannot go back because there is Zionism in Palestine. Not only Israelis, not only Jews. We are not against Jews. A friend of mine, where we were living in Haifa, I used to play with Tamara. I called Tamara many times through media. Tamara, where are you? When my mother said, we have to leave after Deir Yassin massacre. And I asked her, is Tamara coming with us? She said, no. I said, why? She said, she wants to stay. I said, okay, I want to stay. I will lose Tamara. And until now, I'm calling Tamara. We can make peace together, but not with the occupants. Once, Felicia Langer wanted to talk to me. I know her name. She was a lawyer. She defended our prisoners, especially the women. I met her, but I didn't know her. And she said, look, Leila, that was in an international conference about women. She told me, Leila, I was hearing her. Her language is different, her dialect. And the man who was with her, he told me, you don't know Felicia Langer? I said, yes. He said, here she is. I told her, I made like this with my hands because I shook hands with her. And the man said, why did you do that? I said, look, Felicia, when you leave my house, you are occupying my house, and I'm allowed to go my house. We talk together. Unless that, we'll meet again in the field, on the ground. And she said, by fighting? I said, yes, because you are killing my people. I'm telling this to show that every Palestinian, wherever he is or she is, have the same story. Even those who are still living in Palestine in 1948, they suffered a lot. They were under any military law for 10 years. To be acknowledged from the state of Israel that they are not citizens, but they are people staying on our land. Imagine 1.5 million Palestinians. They have only to stay there, even though they gave them an Israeli passport. But still, they are not considered as civilians. And all the governments of Israel always speak about them as demographic bomb. Can you imagine what does that mean? That we are bombs living on our land. They consider us bombs, not human beings, while they have the nuclear bomb, and we speak at it and as them as human beings, but they are occupants. We will not forget, and we will not be we will not forgive until Palestine is free. Now looking the message that I will tell you about to spread the news and the ideas. As Lenin said, what shall we do? This is the question. And this question must be answered according to the facts, according to the balance of forces in this world, according to the sufferings of peoples who are still living under oppression. And this will condense your mission, humanity, and problems. This is a problem for all humanity. And when people suffer, fight, organize themselves, I think we will be victorious. And this question, I will try to give some ideas. It's not enough to go to the streets. It is appreciated highly by us. And this is one of the peaceful means to use. We use peaceful tools also. When we call for BDS, we learned that from South Africa. And we still say Durban is the capital of BDS. But I say South Africa is all BDS. I know it. But we use also some other means. But it is not the mainstream for liberation. It's not the mainstream for freedom. The mainstream for people is to go to arms, always, wherever there is oppression. This oppression is facing people with killing people. If they go to demonstrations, they kill them. The peasants, the workers, everywhere in the world. So we have to use new ones according to the attack on us. Look what happened. The United States came to the Middle East, as they say. They are not coming to help the oppressed. They are coming to pressure us and to pressure Israel to go on with her attack on us. When people rise, the occupants begin to shiver. They feel it, the fear. They fear us. And this is important to change the balance of forces. Let them fear everywhere. They are thieves. They stole our land and built for it, on it, the settlements. Israel is a state of settlements. It's not a state that was born by people who were living on it, historically speaking. That's why Blinken comes and the ministers of defense of Europe, they come to discuss the conflict as if it's a small thing. But they are shivering now to defend the base of terrorism in the world. They are shivering and they look at Israel as if it's homeland, not our homeland. But our people are strong enough to spread the facts of this conflict. You are now Palestinians when you speak about Palestine, and to spread the truth of Palestine. Now, this conference has a mission, how to support the struggle of Palestine until liberation. It will take time. Don't get bored having a long time to be with us. We deserve it, and we appreciate what you do for us. There are a lot who died, were martyrs in Palestine. I remind you of Rachel Corrie, who was killed by an Israeli bulldozer. Imagine, nobody was charged of this cruel thing, not only cruel, criminal. And all the media are speaking about international law. I tell you, this is a lie. We have to learn the lesson. We have all to learn the lesson that the United Nations have a lot of resolutions, and yet none of these resolutions was implemented in Palestine. The resolution 194 calls for the return of Palestinians. This is in 1947. Imagine what is the power of the United Nations. It's the power of the imperialists. There are few, yes, there are few who are with us as governments. China, Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, other countries, but still no resolution is implemented. It's the power of the oppressors, the capitalists, the imperialists, and the Zionists. You know, the Zionist is a strong movement. But it doesn't mean they speak about democracy. They want, they defend human rights. Human rights in America, when it crosses the ocean, it's something else. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, in South Africa, in every country of the world, they speak about human rights as if they are the defenders. They are the violators of human rights everywhere in this world. We have to stop them. We stop them in our countries. We stop them when we mobilize our peoples in the world to show them the truth.
All right, we come out of that third International Dilemmas of Humanity conference. Alternatives and solutions. Let's take you live there now.
We are for humanity, which is why we are for socialism and why we are here. Dilemmas of humanity at an inflection point. Which way? To be slaves or to be free? And Palestine is at the center of the struggle. It's at the center, as people have been saying for so many years, and there are many centers, many, and we represent them all in our struggles. And our sister has put it squarely to us. But my dear, we have seen already, yesterday, 1 million in the streets of the world. And we will see the millions grow to tens of millions. north, south, east and west, from where we all come. And let me remind ourselves of the great warrior Spartacus, the slave who would not live a slave and had the right to resist and rose up against the Romans. And in battle, those warrior slaves were smitten and dying on the battlefield. And the Romans were looking for Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Saracen warrior said, I am Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Philistine slave warrior said, I am Spartacus. And by God, a Hebrew warrior slave said, I am Spartacus. We are all Gaza. We are all West Bank. We are all 1948 Palestine. We are the refugees in the camps. We are Palestine, and we stand with Palestine. And we will not allow, we will do everything we can to stop the Gaza open-air concentration camp. We say it to you, Israeli Zionists and your supporters, your Americans and whatever. We will not allow that open-air concentration camp in Gaza or the West Bank or the refugee camps to become extermination camps. That is to do or die. And we have in such pride to be here with our sister, the great warrior of Palestine, Layla Khaled. And we rise to you, Layla. We rise to you as we did with Naledi Pandor's father, who was a mentor of mine, in exile, a leader of our Communist Party then, and of the ANC. And I was saying to our minister, our brave foreign minister, who was a child at the time, Comrade Naledi, I knew you as that little girl in exile. I'm now the Madala, and you're still a little girl with fire and strength. And I said to her, Comrade Naledi, when Layla Khaled stood up and delivered a blow back in 1970 or so, we had, Layla, a solidarity meeting in Red Lion Square in London, and her father was speaking and praising you because we recognized, comrades, in the Palestinians what we were, what we came from, our dispossession, our right and humanity's right to stand up and resist, to resist that oppression, that slavery. And in international law, you have the right to rise up against occupation. Remind America, remind the United Nations, the mealy-mouthed United Nations, which America has undermined. But comrades, in my 10 minutes now, Comrade Chair, Comrade Andrew, all praise to the organizers who have brought us together. All praise to your union for what you have done. Comrade VJ, Comrade Tings and others, all praise to the International, the Tricontinental, and what you are doing, and what we called upon to do, comrades, what you have called on us to do. And we're already doing, but we have to multiply, not by tens of the million yesterday, not by 20, by 100, by 1,000, throughout this Mother Earth that we want to preserve, because what the Palestinians are facing is what corporate America, the EU, the warmongers, those who want to steal the planet, those who plunder, those, Biden to Sunak to the EU hypocrites who want to see the Palestinians done for once and for all because they stood against what Herzl said and promised to the West back when Zionism, a political doctrine, was founded at the end of the 19th century. Recognize us, recognize our Zionism, because what we will deliver for you is an iron wall against Asian barbarism. That's what we know and understand the context of. And that's why we will defeat them. And let me come to my end, Comrade Chair. We see the way they are crumbling. They gave a full-on green light. Biden, Blinken, Austin, who came and embraced that fascist monster Netanyahu, didn't mention the Palestinians, gave the green light for the absolute eradication of Gaza. And please note, West Bank is next if we don't stop them. Gaza is one thing. Gaza's in our heart, it's precious. The West Bank is exactly what Ben Gvir, Smotrich, the fascist scum that Zionism has produced. That's what they want. They want that land. You know that. That's next. We're standing with Gaza. We're standing with the West Bank. We're standing with every Palestinian. And this is where to be or not to be for humanity. Whatever you say, this, dear comrades, it's linked to the war fronts against Russia, against China, against Syria, against Iran, against Cuba, against Venezuela, everywhere we come from. It's our struggle. It's not just the Palestinian struggle. And we can see them battling. Mr. Biden has already mumbled this morning that he can see that they shouldn't go in and exterminate. The United Nations is finding something of a voice. There has to be a ceasefire. They cannot fight on all those fronts. The US with all its might, Israel with its nuclear hardware, they cannot fight on all those fronts. So let me end, Comrade Chair. We are the many and they are the few. But unless we can organize ourselves in terms of international solidarity that hasn't been seen since many a year, we cannot defeat them, which is why we've got to unite as never before and stop this absolute madness taking place. So let me end by giving you a historic reminder, comrades. I want us to go back to the 1930s, Comrade Andrew, Comrade Irvin, and younger people than you, when the fascist monster was rising to threaten the world. And the first place was Spain and Franco. And the American governments, the British, the Europeans, they wouldn't come to the aid of the Spanish Republic. Russia did, by the way. And what did Dolores Ibarruri of that Spanish Republic, a Communist Party leader, she stood up when the International Brigade came into Madrid, which was under threat from Franco's fascist forces, and she said, we will rather die on our feet than live as slaves on our knees. and she raised the cry, "No pasarán, no pasarán," in Spanish. They shall not pass. Fascism shall not pass. It reverberated around the planet. No pasarán. And what we are saying today, what we say today is Lanya Muru. Lanya Muru. We discussed this yesterday. What can we say in Arabic? What can we say for Gaza and the West Bank, the refugee camps, the 1948 Palestinians, the Palestinians of the diaspora, and all of us in terms of no pasarán? We say Lanya Muru. We say this to our comrades and our brothers and sisters and the children of Gaza and of Palestine everywhere. We are saying to America, we are saying to Israel, Zionism, we say it with Jewish anti-Zionists around the world and even from within Israel, because we mourn the deaths of everybody. And we are saying no further, no further. Lanya Muru. Let us take our message, comrades. We have on our agenda, Comrade Andrew, a huge task ahead to stand by Palestine, to prevent the extermination of the Palestinians, to protect our own future and that of our children. And that is what I would like to say today. We represent the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, which is powerful, called by the Palestinian civil society, in emulation of how, comrades of South Africa, we helped free South Africa from apartheid, by the isolation of apartheid through the anti-apartheid movement and BDS, Comrade Naledi. Comrade Naledi, we are well aware of your position. We are well aware of our government and our minister's position, even in Africa, where she has to battle to get African states to say Lanya Muru, that we won't allow these things to happen, and at the United Nations. Comrade Naledi, we're so looking forward to hearing from you, and we will support you. And in South Africa, Comrade Andrew, we must demand that our government kicks the Israeli ambassador out of our country. He sullies our country. We must raise the flags of Palestine in every one of our villages and towns and metros. We must fill our streets. We must follow through with BDS, and we set an example to the rest of the world, because the Palestinians and the rest of the world on issues of apartheid, they look to South Africa. That's our task, comrades. Please take this back to your beloved people and tell them that we are all Gaza, we are all Palestinians. Pambili, Palestine, Pambili. Yeah, bonga gakulu, comrade.